Good evening to everyone, and welcome to Bringing Spirituality Out of the Closet. We are grateful to have so many of you with us tonight, and I guess that means we are more popular than Donald Trump. So, hey, very glad about that you selected to be with us on this occasion. My name is Reverend Dr. Roland Stringfellow, and I'm a staff member with the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies and Religion that is located on the campus of Berkeley's Pacific School of Religion, Berkeley, California, that is. I am a local pastor in Detroit, Michigan, and CLGS is celebrating its 20th anniversary as a center educating minds on queer theology and social justice. And we're so very grateful to be a co-sponsor tonight, along with Inclusive Justice, which is Michigan's coalition of welcoming congregations, along with DignityUSA and New Ways Ministry, and Families with Dignity, which is located here in Michigan as well. I want to give a couple of logistics for our time together. We recognize that many of you might have questions, and we hope you do, for our panelists. Please use the question and answer option, which is found on your menu on Zoom, to make sure that we capture those questions, and we'll make sure that those are received by our moderator tonight. The chat, let's just reserve that for any other comments or amens or anything that you want to put there. But I'll try to keep my eye open for the chat just in case a question gets slipped in there as well. But primarily, please use the question and answer place for your questions. We are recording this event tonight, and so we invite you to take the time to change your name if you would like to. If you would like to ask a question, but not to have your name associated with the question, you may go ahead and do so at this point in time and just find the menu option to rename yourself. At this point, we are not anticipating having any media to be here, but just in case we do have any media, if you would identify yourselves, because we want to try to keep this as safe as possible, and I'll allow Dr. Ford, our moderator tonight, to say a little bit more about that as we move forward. But nonetheless, just wanted to make everyone aware that this session is being recorded. I also want to assure that if there are any negative or derogatory comments or statements that people, from anyone, they will be ejected from the room. And so just want to make sure that we all are having a good and healthy and uplifting conversation tonight. You are in for a treat, and we are so very grateful that you are here to join us. We recognize that those who identify as Catholics within the church, who are on the more progressive end of the spectrum, have a challenge, especially dealing with the hierarchy of the church. The background for this particular event tonight, this webinar, is my dear friends, Tom and Linda Nelson, who you'll be hearing from later this evening. They have experienced quite a bit of discrimination because they support members of the LGBTQ community. Following, and I'm not going to steal their story, but following that, we have recognized that another dear friend of ours here in Michigan, who was a church musician, was expelled from her job for coming out as lesbian and marrying her partner. And then our local Dignity chapter lost their place as well. So we recognized that there was a lot happening, and we want to try to create a space for conversation, for healing, and even a little bit of strategy. But I will say this much. When it comes to strategizing, I will invite you at the end of our time together to a second webinar that will take place on Tuesday, October 27th, which will be a training led by myself and Father Brian Massengale. And we'll be having a way of how to strategize and do this type of liberating work within the Catholic Church, entitled Liberating Religious Liberty. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to our facilitator tonight, Dr. Craig Ford, and I have some words I want to share about Dr. Ford. Pardon me, please. Hopefully you are not seeing my screen. Here we go. All right. So Dr. A. Craig Ford Jr. is an assistant professor of theology and religious studies and the co-director of the Peace and Justice Interdisciplinary Minor at St. Norbert College. A graduate of the University of Notre Dame, Yale Divinity School, and Boston College, Dr. Ford writes on the topics at the intersection of queer theory, critical race theory, and the Catholic moral tradition. His current book project, titled Works of Art, Race, Sexuality, Gender, and the Future Catholic Theologies of Embodiment, is currently under contract with Fortress Press. Dr. Ford is also sought out as a workshop leader on the issues of racial, sexual, and gender justice, working not only with Catholic parishes, but with other colleges and universities around the country. He currently lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but he has left his heart in New York City. We are honored and blessed to have such a wonderful facilitator with us tonight. So I would like to introduce to you Dr. Craig Ford.
Thank you, Dr. Stringfellow. I appreciate that introduction. I really am excited about the opportunity to introduce you to the people who are truly trailblazers within the Catholic tradition. When I was thinking about being on this panel today, I felt so honored to be in the presence of people who have made the road and the load easier to bear for people who are LGBTQ plus Catholics. And so really these stories are the context for our work tonight. A phrase that Dr. Stringfellow used the first time we met to talk about this webinar is something that I want to introduce to you tonight, thinking about our moment here as a movement moment within not only our country, but within our church. And thinking about what it means to recognize properly and celebrate the dignity of LGBTQ plus people in the world, and specifically tonight in the church. And so our goal tonight is to figure out what it looks like to move towards that greater realization, thinking within the context of the Catholic Church that we are all interacting with in different ways every day. What I love about this panel is that each of these three, each presentation, each of the three presentations you're going to hear from represent a different way, a different model and angle by which the dignity of LGBTQ plus people are recognized within the Catholic Church, different angles and movement strategies. And so what we're going to investigate tonight is hearing what these different strategies are through the stories of the people who lead them. So without me talking any more about what's going to happen, I want to get closer to what is actually happening. So I want to introduce to you the people who you're going to hear from in the order in which you're going to hear from them as well. So I'll start with Marianne, Duddy, Burke, Marianne, would you raise your hand and say hello, just like people know? Hello there, there she is. So Marianne Duddy Burke is the executive director of DignityUSA, the nation's foremost and most progressive organization of Catholics committed to justice, equality, and full inclusion of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex people in our church and society. She's also served as DignityUSA's president and was the first woman ever elected to that post. She has a master's in divinity from Weston School of Theology, now integrated into Boston College School of Theology and Ministry, and a bachelor's degree with honors from Wellesley College, also in Massachusetts. Marianne has more than 35 years experience in leadership positions, both in nonprofit and corporate organizations, and is a frequent speaker at national and regional conferences, representing Dignity in over 2,500 media stories. Marianne lives in Boston with Becky, her spouse of more than 25 years, and with their two adopted children. So welcome, Marianne. Looking forward to hearing from you right after these intros. Next, I want to introduce you to Frank Bernardo and New Ways Ministry. So Francis Bernardo serves as Executive Director of New Ways Ministry, a national Catholic ministry of justice, education, and reconciliation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer Catholics, and the wider community. As you can see, we have a wide-spanning realm of acronyms. We love it. He was appointed Executive Director in 1986, a position he still holds. 1996, sorry, 1996. He consults with parishes, schools, religious communities, and other Catholic institutions on developing pastoral initiatives and programs for LGBT people. And he's spoken on a variety of topics, including, listen to this, people, the Vatican's approach to homosexuality, the history of Catholic thought on sexuality, the language and arguments of Catholic thinking on homosexuality. That's worth 6 books right there. Gay, lesbian, transgender development and spirituality, U.S. Catholic pastoral outreach to LGBT people, the spiritual gifts of LGBT people, and new theological approaches to LGBTQ people, marriage equality, transgender spirituality. We are so lucky to have such a well-articulated speaker. To date, he's conducted programs in 83 dioceses, and he lives in Greenbelt, Maryland, which is in the DC metropolitan area. So Frank, you just want to wave your hand to say hello to everyone? Yes. And last but certainly not least, I would love to introduce to you the duo we have tonight, Linda and Tom. I want to introduce Linda first. Linda Carl Nelson is the mother of 3 children, the youngest of whom, John, is gay. A graduate of Marygrove College and Wayne State University in Detroit, Linda did postgraduate work in the Master of Religious Studies program at University of Detroit Mercy. Linda is a former board member and president of Fortunate Families Incorporated. After being a widow for 16 years, Linda reestablished a friendship with Tom Nelson. He's next door to her, and a widower she met at PFLAG. Tom and Linda were married in May 2006. Together, they spent 2 years as co-presidents of PFLAG Detroit. So, the gentleman next to Linda is Tom Nelson. He's the father of 6. His 3rd child, Mark, is gay. He's a graduate of the University of Notre Dame, go Irish, Michigan State University, and Tom is retired from Ford Motor Company, engineering management, and a former naval officer. He's held leadership roles in several civic organizations, as well as serving as co-president of PFLAG Detroit with his wife, Linda Carl Nelson. In addition, he served on the board of directors of Fortunate Families. And you're going to hear from them tonight because in 2010, Tom and Linda started a PFLAG chapter, and in 2014, they founded Fortunate Families Detroit. And you'll hear the story about how they now serve on the leadership team of Families with Dignity. So would the both of you just wave your hands to say hello to everyone tonight as well? Yes. So these are the 3 panelists that we have with us tonight. I'd love to begin by passing the mic to Marianne Duddy Burke and DignityUSA. So please, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Craig, and thanks to everybody who's attending. And it's really wonderful to be reunited with these panelists, all of whom are people I have worked with over the years and have tremendous respect and love for. So it's nice to be together in this pandemic situation. And I would just like to correct one quick thing in the introduction about Dignity Detroit. Like the Families with Dignity group in Detroit, they have been banned by the Archbishop, through one of his minion bishops, from having any priests of the Archdiocese minister with them, a ban that some priests have chosen to violate. But thanks to the wonderful, generous hospitality of an order of women religious, they do still have a place to meet if they choose to continue meeting on Catholic space, which they will do, at least occasionally. And I see a leader from the community is with us tonight. So just to clarify the status of Dignity Detroit for those who might have been following that in the news. Craig gave a great introduction as to what DignityUSA is. We identify as a group of Catholics committed to justice, equality, and full inclusion of LGBTQI people in our church and in society. Our organization was actually begun back in 1969, before Stonewall, to provide people who identified at that time as gay and lesbian a safe place to attend Mass together, to discuss what it meant to be gay and Catholic, to do community service projects that were rooted in gospel values. And from there, it just kind of spread all the way across the country. And we have also expanded our community over the year to include allies, family members, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, you know, a whole wide range of folks. Dignity has always been comprised of people who love the church and who love their Catholicism, whatever that means to folks. And for some, it has been a place to reconcile their identity and their spirituality before moving on their spiritual journeys. For others, it has become a long-term spiritual home. We are a membership organization whose mission and work are guided by the experience, needs, goals, and priorities of our members, rather than by church teaching or governance or any other kind of outside influence. So over the years, that has meant we have become something of an extra ecclesial organization, Catholic, but standing alongside rather than within the institutional structure. And I'm certainly happy to explore what that means later on if it's of interest to folks. I would say that people generally come to Dignity because they have a need to work through the ways in which their own faith or relationship with God and their identity put them into conflicts with what they know official Catholic teaching on being gay, transgender, or an ally to be, or with things they hear from the pulpit. In my own case, this conflict became enfleshed when I was in college. While coming out as a lesbian, I remained very active with the Newman Catholic Center and was elected the group's president at the start of our sophomore year. In the spring of that year, I was summoned to the chaplain's office, which wasn't terribly unusual, but this time when I got there, he closed the door and asked me, I've heard that you are a lesbian. Is that true? And when I answered yes, he said, we can't have someone like you representing Catholics on campus. I will accept your resignation immediately. And that was, you know, a really painful moment because while I knew the priest was wrong and never questioned my relationship with God, and I never felt that sense of divine condemnation that so many people have been burdened with, I did lose my community. I connected with various other spiritual networks throughout the college and in the community where I learned a lot and came to value the elements of a number of faiths, but I never felt entirely at home. In the fall following my graduation from college, when I had just barely begun my studies at a Jesuit seminary, I learned that there was a Dignity chapter in my area through a newspaper article and attended my first Mass there that very night. That was in 1982, and I have been a member ever since. I would say that the conflict that brought me to Dignity is emblematic of most of those that we serve. Many people's stories are more dramatic than mine, and many are more internal. Over the years, we've seen the details of these stories trending in lots of different ways. They may be around how women have felt alienated as both woman and lesbian or bi or trans. They might involve trans people seeking faithful validation of their identities. Lots of times it's parents who have learned that their children are queer and who know that there is an alternative to the exclusionary message they hear if they're not associated with a welcoming parish. It might be someone who has been fired or fears their employment at a Catholic school job, a job they consider their vocation. The stories are many, and we try to make space for everyone at the table. Because of this, our advocacy is varied. As I said earlier, we advocate for the full inclusion of LGBTQI people in our church, meaning unconditional welcome in all Catholic settings. We work for the day, for example, that all of our sacraments are celebrated with openly LGBTQI people, including the baptism of our kids, marriage of same-sex couple, ordination of all who are called, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital or relationship status. We advocate that transgender people be affirmed as they identify. We also bring a pro-equality Catholic voice to the public square, where we often wind up being at loggerheads with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops or with state conferences of bishops. So we advocate, at the Supreme Court and Congress, state and local issues, on government issues, and even on issues of international rights. So one example of ways in which we advocate within the church and the ways in which that takes different forms, I'll just talk about one recent issue. Over the past year or so, bishops in a number of states have issued policies on transgender or gender expansive children in Catholic schools that would ban their enrollment or their continuing on in school or make life incredibly difficult for them. In Illinois, we actually exposed the policy and then launched a petition to make this formerly secret policy known to the public and encouraging Catholics to object to it. In Minnesota, 6 of our members, including 2 transgender people, a Catholic school principal, and a spiritual director, sat down with the Archbishop for over 2 hours and explained in great detail how the policy could be harmful and how their own experiences of Catholic education, especially for the transgender folks, was repressive to them. In Indiana, we worked with a number of other groups on a multifaceted media campaign, held a COVID-safe car rally where over 100 vehicles festooned with flags and banners and messages of inclusion circled the Catholic Center. And over 1,600 local Catholics signed letters of objections that have been sent to the Archbishop of Indianapolis, to the Papal Nuncio, and to the Prefect of the Congregation for Catholic Education. So we believe that this advocacy is absolutely consistent with the central tenets of our faith, and I look forward to discussing this with all of you later on. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marianne. Frank, would you like to go next? Might have to unmute yourself, I think. Not yet. Oh.
How about now?
Yep. You just have to get rid of that echo in the phone,
Hey,
but yeah.
Sorry about that. Wonders of technology. Well, I'm really glad to be here. I thank Craig and I thank Roland for inviting me, and I'm delighted to be with folks that we at New Ways have worked with for many, many years in the trenches. And it's so good to see in the list of attendees so many familiar names, and wish I could see your smiling faces too. So thank you. New Ways Ministry. In 1971, Sister Janine Gramick, one of the founders of New Ways Ministry, was a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And she was getting a doctorate in, of all things, mathematics. And she met a man, a gay man. She says the first gay man that she knew was gay, at a chaplain social. He had been alienated from the church, and he asked her, he knew she was a nun, and said, what is the church doing for my gay brothers and sisters? And Sister Janine, being a very earnest person, in the best sense of that word, said, I don't know, but I'll try to find out. And what she found out in 1971 was that there was very little in the church for, at that time, referred to as gay and lesbian people. So she decided to start to do something. So she invited her friend Dominic, the gay man, to bring his friends to her apartment for masses, for discussion groups, for prayers, for retreat days. And along the way, she needed to get priests. And one priest who came along was Father Robert Nugent, a Salvatorian priest. And the two of them started out on a journey of doing direct service pastoral care ministry with lesbian gay people. What they realized over the years that they did that was that the biggest problem in the church was not lesbian and gay people. The biggest problem in the church was that people, other people, didn't know anything about lesbian and gay people. So they saw that the way to tackle this issue was through education. So I tell that story because that is the big theme or strategy of New Ways Ministry. Is we are primarily an educational ministry. We're also an advocacy ministry, and we're also a spiritual development ministry, but our primary mission is to be educators. The way they thought about it back then in '77 was to be bridge builders. That was the theme and the image that they came up with back then, to build what they said were bridges of justice and reconciliation for the gay community, between the gay community and the Catholic Church. And what I've learned in my 30 years of doing this work is something that someone told me early on, is that if you're going to be a bridge between groups, be prepared to be walked on from both directions. And that does happen with frequency. Education. We do, among our many projects are that we have educational workshops for parishes. We do retreats and theological weekends for people who are trying to work on LGBTQ issues in the church. We maintain a daily blog, Bondings 2.0, that we call a daily blog on Catholic LGBTQ news, opinion, and spirituality. We have currently, we've had many programs over the years based on the needs of the church at various times. 3 programs right now. One is called Next Steps, developing Catholic LGBTQ parish ministry. We have one called Transforming Love, which is about transgender issues and gender identity issues in the Catholic Church. And we have one called Creating a Spirit of Welcome, which is a workshop that we have done to help schools develop, Catholic schools develop policies, programs, projects around LGBTQ issues. So again, primarily educational, and we're primarily working with pastoral ministers, with heads of religious communities, with pastors, school principals, campus ministers, college faculty, you know, people, as we say, we try to reach the middle managers of the church. The, you know, not the people at the top, and not the people necessarily at the grassroots, although we do reach out to them. But our main goal is to get the people who make the practical decisions in the church to become more welcoming, as a way to build a church of justice and full equality for LGBTQ people. We also do, as I said, spiritual development programs. We have a number of retreats that we give, although they've been postponed right now. We have two big programs, one called Women Journey Weavings, which is a program for lesbian sisters and for the leaders of women's religious communities. We've been doing an annual program, an annual weekend for the past about 15 years on that, and so many wonderful policies and programs in religious communities of women have developed. And we also do one for the men, for the gay priests, brothers and deacons, a weekend retreat for their spiritual development and to help them develop communities of support. We lobby with bishops. We've over the years have met with many bishops, and true to our mission, we try to educate the bishops. The bishops, I've met a number of them on different occasions where I've gone on to explain some of the lesser known facets of church's teaching on LGBT issues, and they've said, really, do we teach that? so even bishops have been our students. We do a major symposium or national conference every 5 years, and we also track. Father Nugent was a librarian, so his lasting imprint has been to archive things. So on our website, we track a lot of issues around church employment and LGBT issues, church leaders who've said positive things about same-sex couples. We've chronicled the entire papacy of Pope Francis. And we have a list of colleges and parishes that have been very welcoming of LGBTQ people. I'd just like to say that in closing, that the thing that has kept me going for many years is that many people think that my daily schedule is filled with people who are attacking LGBTQ people. But I really have the privilege of meeting Catholics across the country and around the globe now too, who are trying to make the church a more welcoming place, a more equal and just place. And that's who I meet every day. That's who I talk with. And that has been such an inspiration for me that I really feel blessed in these 30 years of doing this work. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Frank. And last but certainly not least, I want to turn the floor back over to Dr. Stringfellow and Linda and Tom, who are just going to introduce their Families with Dignity together.
Are you able to unmute yourselves? There you go.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Stringfellow and Dr. Ford as well. This is a very, first of all, I want to say the first two speakers in this webinar are outstanding, outstanding examples of LGBTQ ministry in this church and beyond. Bravo to both of you. It almost brings me to tears to hear what you've done. But today is a very exciting day for Families with Dignity as well. In a way, it's kind of a birthday for us because yesterday, our website as Families with Dignity went live for the first time. We're very excited about that. Of course, we'll share that information with you later. It's been a journey, and this event tonight is in effect our kind of coming out as Families with Dignity. Tom and I are just excited and pleased to be sort of on the stage here with Frank and Marianne. And although they're the youngsters in this foursome, we have to say that they have been and will continue to be role models for us. So in order to hear a little bit about our Families with Dignity ministry, we're going to go back a little bit and give you some history on it. And the history began as Fortunate Families Detroit in 2014. And this ministry grew out of, Tom and I were board members of Fortunate Families National for about six and a half years, from 2006 to 2013. And when we retired from the board, we decided we wanted to have a similar ministry in a local fashion for our Detroit area. So we established Fortunate Families Detroit. And we were very fortunate at that time to be invited to have a parish home as an LGBT ministry. That was very unusual at the time. And our pastor at Christ the King invited us to call Christ the King our home. So we met there regularly about every 6 weeks or so, except in the summer when we took off a couple of months, but we were busy in the summer as well because we always participated. We had a booth that we shared with Christ the King Parish and another parish at the Motor City Pride event, which took place every summer in June. That was always an interesting event because people would stop by the booth and say, well, what are you people, Catholic people, doing here? Does your bishop know you're here? And that was very intriguing and fun. We held retreat days annually every year, and our first retreat day, we invited Frank Bernardo to be our speaker. And we had, it was kind of a preview of things to come. And Tom is going to share what happened when we invited Frank to be our speaker.
Well, you told him he was kicked out. Yeah.
No, I didn't. Frank was invited to tell us about his experiences in Rome at the Synod on the Family. And we thought, well, there's nothing wrong with that. How can anyone object to that? But the Archdiocese did object, and we had a problem.
Yeah. And of course, when you stop and think about it, my goodness, Frank Bernardo was such a terrible threat to the hierarchy. Holy cats, well, his words of love and support would oppose most of what the Archdiocese was trying to impose. Anyway, they gave us just 3 days notice when they declared we couldn't meet in our own parish hall. Well, the Holy Spirit isn't so easily thwarted. We met instead at our local condominium, Linda and our condominium meeting hall facility, and Frank spoke and our retreat went off just fine.
That's funny. So going forward, when the Archdiocese held conferences to support the the Courage Apostolate as this sort of semi-official ministry to support LGBT Catholics in our diocese. Fortunate Families Detroit decided we had to do something to let people know that we oppose that. The Courage Apostolate's main thrust is that you must not have sex as an LGBT person, to be very honest. You must live what they call a celibate life, which is a misnomer, but we all know what they mean. So we held a prayer vigil. And at this point, I think there's a photo that Dr. Stringfellow, you'll put up for us, maybe? There it is. Families with Dignity, March 7th. I believe it was 2015, but I'm not sure. We had eventually about 25 people showed up. We had our signs. We just marched, we prayed, we sang. We just made a little bit of an effect, I'm sure, on the people who were attending the conference. There were a couple of those conferences, and we did have prayer vigils at both of them. So that was one. Thanks, Dr. Stringfellow. That's fine. Thank you. That's one of the projects we embarked on as Fortunate Families Detroit. And then when the Archbishop proclaimed that those who support same-sex marriage should not present themselves to receive the Eucharist, we knew that that could not be held to be a fact or true. And so we had another prayer vigil, this time in front of the offices of the Archdiocese downtown Detroit. Again, we just prayed and sang and held our signs and had lots of reaction from people, lots of thumbs up and lots of honks from the cars. One of our more recent projects was to invite pastors to open up a space in their parishes for LGBTQ people to just meet. We didn't want to present a program. We didn't want to make any kind of noise or trouble. We just wanted a place for them to meet. When we approached pastors on this, they were very hesitant. They were not comfortable doing this. So we thought, well, we'll find something else that they could do in their parishes. And so we suggested something we thought was a little less threatening, and that would have been a discussion of James Martin's book, Building a Bridge.
You skipped me.
I skipped you. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm going to go back.
I'll go back to
This is a team effort. No, you're going to do it now.
that. Okay.
Tom had something to say about courage, and I cut him off. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, Courage folks have a very negative approach to ministering to our LGBT families. Now, their basic premises is that, quote, you are all disordered and intrinsically inclined to evil, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, they start off by saying how terrible it is to be gay or lesbian person. There's nothing in their agenda that would make a gay person feel good about themselves. Courage, it promotes self-hate. That's what it does. There's no question about it. It wasn't long ago that they were promoting reparative therapy. But they had to quit that when even the civil authorities condemned it. It's just stupid. Okay, that's all.
Thanks, honey. Back to Building a Bridge. We thought that was a wonderful opportunity for pastors to offer a chance for people to actually even learn about LGBT people and discuss some of these issues. But when we approached one of our very supportive pastors, he felt it was necessary to actually get permission from his bishop in order to hold this book discussion in his parish. And when he asked the bishop denied the pastor the ability to do that because, quote, Fortunate Families Detroit has a long history of dissent from church teaching and should not be allowed to offer programs in Catholic parishes of the Archdiocese, unquote. So that was another nail in our coffin. And all this was preliminary to the letter we received from Archbishop Battersby as a delegate of Archbishop Vigneron in March this year, forbidding Fortunate Families Detroit to meet anywhere on Catholic property in the Archdiocese. This letter followed by a week the letter that Dignity Detroit had received, forbidding them to meet and to hold their mass celebrations on Catholic property. And at the same time, there was a letter sent out to all priests of the Archdiocese, informing them that they were forbidden to say Mass for Dignity any longer. So, Tom, I think you wanted to add something here.
Number 3. Yeah. Right. Well, our pastor, he's just a brilliant man. He's written a lengthy essays on the subject of human sexuality, and it's just an amazing person. But he also knows that the hierarchy holds the key to his future retirement, and they could make his prospects pretty threatening and pretty dim. So he has to obey. I mean, just do what he's told. He doesn't have any freedom. So yes, threatening is the Archdiocese specialty. Loving is not part of their agenda, baby. That's for sure.
So after this action by the Archdiocese, we had to rethink everything. We were totally in shock. We had no inkling that this was coming. So we decided that we had to talk about the elephant in the room. That was something that we had always avoided doing because we were trying to be a partner in building that bridge. But we knew eventually that we couldn't remain silent any longer about the damaging labels that the church uses to describe our LGBTQ kids. Language such as intrinsically inclined to evil and objectively disordered, and the use of courage, the courage message as a support for our LGBT people. And we couldn't refuse to condemn the harm and the unnecessary pain that results from these teachings, like the breakup of families and the internalized shame and the harassment and violence and the dismissal of church employees because of their same-sex marriage partner, and even finally self-harm and suicide.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that because the suicide rate for young gay people is 4 times what it is for straight people. 4 times. I know about that because my own son attempted suicide when he was a teenager in college. He had heard his unwitting father pontificate church doctrine. Oh yeah, I was well-educated Catholic. The problem was my intellect was in a coma, but I knew all the rules and all the reasons, and my son heard about it as he was growing up. I had no clue he was gay. And he decided as a freshman in college, his first semester and first month or so, and decided that the only solution to his terrible self was to end his life. So one weekend, early weekend in October, he sat down in his room all alone, wrote us a note, and then swallowed a whole bottle of prescription strength painkillers, more than enough to do the job. And then he lay down on his bunk and waited to die. But the Holy Spirit intervenes, believe me. Mark told me some months later that God came to him at that moment and spoke to him very clearly. And he said to him, "Mark, I made you just the way you are, and you are good." It kind of frightened Mark, and he said he ran into the bathroom and forced himself to vomit the pills that he'd taken 15 minutes prior to that.
Go ahead.
Anyway, he survived. And he said he didn't dare lay down for the next 36 hours for fear he wouldn't wake up. He survived, praise God, and he's gone on to be one of the most loving human beings I have ever known. Jesus told us, I give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. That's what it's all about. My son has taught me so much. And yes, it's all about love. Thank you, Lord, for that.
You know, it is for Families with Dignity, it is all about families. It's about parents. It's about kids. In our previous life as Fortunate Families Detroit, our main focus, our main goal was support for families and for LGBT people. And that is still certainly a goal of ours. But since our dismissal from the Archdiocese, we have, as I've said, decided that we needed to talk about the elephant in the room. And so one of our goals now is to challenge church leadership. And we'll have to do that much more openly than we ever did before. And that has inspired a new mission statement. It took us 3.5 months to put it together, but we're very proud of it. And it represents who Families with Dignity is today. And Roland, if you could put up that last slide, we can see what the mission statement is. There it is. Families with Dignity is a Catholic ministry that supports our LGBTQ plus community and families by promoting equality and inclusion among all people and by sharing our personal stories. We are based in Detroit and have been orphaned by the Archdiocese because of our work. Undaunted, we vow to continue advocating for the welcome and full inclusion of LGBTQ plus people into the church, including acknowledgement and support of all legal marriages, of committed and loving family units, of transgender and non-binary people, and of workplace equality for LGBTQ plus people. And there you see a link to our website, and we encourage everyone to go there. Thank you. Thank you so much for celebrating with us on our Families with Dignity birthday today.
Thank you, Tom and Linda, for that story. And thank you for being so honest about where you are right now, moving into a new era of your organizing, and just the frankness of your discussion, right? It takes so much courage to be able to tell stories. And I think that that's something that our church can benefit from at any point, right? People can argue about theology and whatever, right? But you can't argue with people's stories. You can't argue with the experiences they have. These are the people that God has given us to serve. And so you can't negate them, you know, and I think that that's what each of your stories in some way show. So right now, we really want to open the space to people asking questions. I see there's a lot of activity in the chat as well. Lots of encouragement coming to all the panelists, by the way, in the chat. But really, we're open to people asking questions about dignity with Marianne, about New Ways Ministry with Frank, or about where Families with Dignity, their pastor, their future. So the floor is open. So as you ask those questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A if you have them. But I really want to, selfishly, I think I want to start by asking a question myself, which I guess it has to do with like the context of where we find ourselves, right? So I started out with saying like, yeah, we're in this movement, you know, movement making moment. And in our church, we have a Pope who is different than what we've experienced since Vatican II, since John Paul II, to be frank, right? And so I'm curious about your outlooks on the future of LGBTQ plus work within the Roman Catholic Church. Does the papacy of Pope Francis give you optimism? Does it give you pause when you evaluate Pope Francis and what his effect will be on recognizing the dignity of LGBTQ people in the church. How do you evaluate his effect? And I open that to all three panelists.
I would be happy to respond to that. I feel really very positive about the effect that Francis has had on our concerns in the Catholic Church. I know that I don't believe that he's going to make any major changes in doctrine that would be that we would like. I think that's far down the road, but I think he certainly created a new atmosphere in this church, making it possible to talk about these issues a little more openly. And I think it gives the middle people, or I don't know if they're middle people, but people like bishops and pastors, a little more room to feel comfortable discussing these things, not only with parishioners and people like us, but with each other. So I think that's the gift that he's given to the church right now, is the gift of this openness, a little more openness to talk about these issues.
I'd like to comment on it. My view is Pope Francis is certainly the best Pope we've had virtually in my lifetime, and yet I don't feel that there's anything going to happen to change the church's stupidity, is what I term it, in a very long time. It's going to take a long time, because I think the church is caught up in judgmentalism, and they're lacking the fundamental basis of Christianity, and that's loving. If it isn't loving, it isn't Christian, period. And these guys just don't get it yet. I think we are confronted with a situation that Jesus faced in his time. The hierarchy in Jesus' time, he referred to as brood of vipers. And why? Because they'd throw down all these rules and regulations that you got to follow, and you weren't living a good, happy, joyous life. Tough, too bad. Just follow the rules. That's all that counted. And our hierarchy today is doing the same thing. What they don't get is love. And in my opinion, one of the main reasons they don't get love is because they don't have any intimate relationships. And I won't get into that.
Yeah, I'd like to push what something Linda said a little bit farther. And that is about the atmosphere of more openness and a little bit less fear that exists within the institutional structure of the church. And I think that is something that has provided some real benefit to the LGBTQI community, across the globe in some ways. But I think Francis himself is sort of caught in the bind that institutional Catholicism finds itself in. His pastoral inclinations seem to be very, very strong. All these meetings that he's had with LGBTQI people, with families, the transgender house, washing the feet of folks affected, living with HIV and AIDS on Holy Thursday. I mean, there's lots and lots of examples of how he pastors folks really well. But that has to be held right up alongside the fact that there are these institutional prohibitions on LGBTQI people living full and rich and free lives as who God intended us to be. And Francis is as much a stickler for those things, and has said horrendous things about transgender people, about same-sex marriage. Just in the last couple weeks, an Irish priest was confronted with documents he had to sign to try and resume his ministry, and 2 of the 3 things he would have had to agree to resume his ministry were on same-sex relationships and transgender identity, you know, and that he would adhere to church teachings. Thank God he refused to do that. But, you know, there is still this, you know, you're welcome, but kind of thing. So I have to say that I think that the church is going to change over time, but it is going to be because the people of the church, those of us who live in families and interact with each other and experience folks in reality rather than in sort of a set of policies and rules and pastoral practices, just know that there is no validity in these kinds of punitive teachings and practices, and that we pull the underpinnings of that out from under the church.
Amen.
You know,
Right on.
change in the church.
Hi, I'd like to. Ooh, I'm having.
You're muted again, Frank. Still muted, yeah. Do you want me to? Okay, you're unmuted now.
Okay. I'd like to say that, you know, Pope Francis both elates me and irritates me as we watch the news day by day from what comes out of the Vatican. But I think, you know, and if you look on our website at our chronicle, anytime he says anything or does anything about LGBTQ issues, we archive it on our website. So the genius, though, I think about him is that he has recognized that church leaders have painted themselves into such a corner when it comes to LGBTQ issues that they had no way out. They had no way out. And I think he's trying to show them a way out through pastoral accompaniment. And I believe that church teaching changes because of a cycle, that pastoral practice changes first on the grassroots level. And then theologians observe that pastoral practice and they write about it and they say what's good and bad about that. And then that theology that they produce is looked at by church leaders who issue documents about what Catholics should do or give guidance about what Catholics should do, which brings it around in the circle again to the people at the grassroots who start taking that guidance and putting it into practice. And I think that the guidance that Pope Francis is doing is allowing for a lot of the good practice that I have seen open up greatly in the last 6 or 7 years.
Thank you. Yes, so we do have a question in the Q&A, which I am going to condense a bit and then offer it to the panelists. But I'll give a little bit of a preview first in terms of what also stuck out to me in all 3 of your comments. I loved the different spatial images that each of you used at different times. So Marianne, when she was talking about dignity, used this idea of Catholic and standing alongside the institution, right? And I love that image, right? And then Frank had used this image of reaching in and affecting the middle managers, so to speak, right? Like almost positioning himself as if he's somewhere outside, but then grabbing people and saying, hey, shaking them, right? Like do something, like, and focusing on the people who are maybe not the bishops, but the people who have to see the people of God very often in many, many different circumstances beyond what we're normally used to seeing our bishops do, right? And then with Families with Dignity, there was this image of creating space within the church, right? Almost being in and creating this space where people can be, right? And so I saw kind of in these spatial metaphors, I saw such great imagery for what the different strategies are. So part of the question that we just received is about how to do some sort of action based on the different strategies. So the idea that's in the question right now is, why don't we use October 11th, which is National Coming Out Day, as a day to have a coordinated day by which LGBTQ plus families and people make themselves known in their Catholic parishes and institutions. And the suggestion even said going beyond National Coming Out Day, which is October 11th, but even thinking about maybe Pentecost, right? The day that the Holy Spirit descends and enlivens the church, right? So that question comes from Donald here. And I'm just interested in seeing how each of you would receive an idea like that. What do you think?
I'd love to start there because we actually have such a program. It's called Solidarity Sunday, and it is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. We'll actually just finished putting together a whole video commemorative and liturgical recognition of the history of this program. But exactly the idea was, we grounded it as a faith-based, Catholic-based anti-violence movement, because 25 years ago we thought that was our way into the church, that all of us could agree that no person, no matter what their identity was, should be subject to violence. And we invited Catholics to wear a rainbow ribbon to church, and we deployed people all across the country who stood outside of parishes and gave out, you know, the little brochure and the prayer card and the ribbon and the pledge. And it took off for a few years in some places. It obviously didn't, you know, become as big as some things have been, but it has, there are still places all across the country that celebrate Solidarity Sunday. And typically what I love about it now is that it is often an interfaith celebration where a number of the justice-oriented churches in a community will come together and remember those who were killed by anti-gay, anti-trans violence in their communities in the past year or nationally within the past year. They'll say the prayer. We have versions of the prayer that are Christian, that are interfaith, that are ecumenical, and then commit to some kind of outreach in their community based on that. So it's a great idea. We'd love to find ways to amplify that and keep renewing that program, but you can certainly find out about it at the DignityUSA.org website. So Donald, join us in that effort.
Did anyone else want to comment on that? Tom, Melinda, would you like to? You're still muted though.
Yeah. I'm unmuted now, right? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I could see Marianne's face when you brought up that idea. She could hardly contain herself. As families with dignity, I can see great potential for a project like this. In fact, I can see collaborating in some way with our partners, Dignity Detroit, who are in the same situation we are in terms of ministry in our archdiocese, with let's get together, there are parishes in our archdiocese who have pastors who are very supportive of the work that we do. As Marianne indicated, I think there even are pastors, priests, who are choosing not to obey the forbidding of saying Mass for dignity. So I think if we could get together with Dignity Detroit and perhaps find those pastors that are willing to let us come to their churches and maybe give out the little rainbow crosses or the rainbow ribbons. It's kind of it's an idea that has a beginning. I think we can work with it. We can get together with Dignity Detroit and make something happen. I love the date too.
And this is Frank. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. I think that it's a great idea. I think Dignity's program is wonderful and should be amplified. I think that to rely on one day is a very difficult thing to do. And I think we should have these days as reminders, but I also think it's something that has to be done every day. And that the coordination of people all coming out on the same day is really a mammoth logistical thing to coordinate. This is coming from me as an organizer. But I do think that that coming at time and again, research has shown the way that people change their attitudes and thoughts about LGBTQI issues is to meet people. So I always encourage people, as best you can and as safely as you can, come out to the people in your faith community.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes.
It leads me to this question, right, of what does, so short of changing, short of there being a change in church teaching around sexuality and gender identity, right, like that, short of that sort of change, where does the power lie in producing that change? What is the thing that we can most do in the meantime, right? Because I'm thinking, right, like as Marianne pointed out, right, Marianne's organization puts a ton of pressure on the Bishops' Conference because they criticize it so openly, and they also they say, we're not going to be a part of something that does not fully recognize the full sacramental value of each person, the full being of each person, right? And then we have other tactics where, like, there are people who just dismiss those types of people, say, oh, they're not Catholic, not going to worry about it, right? And then you have new ways, which will say, like, we are trying to hold together this very tender balance between trying to educate and also trying to push the door and make sure people feel welcome. And then you have Families with Dignity that has just moved from one space to another. What are the tactics that we use now, short of a change in teaching? What's going to be most effective?
Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to comment on that. I think one of the things we need to do, and I'm not sure how you do this, and that is we need to communicate. But communication is a two-way street. And unfortunately, we aren't doing a very good job of it. I'll give you an example. I've, over the past many years, beginning with Cardinal Maida, written a total of at least 20 letters to the bishop and to the cardinal, asking for a face-to-face visit that we could discuss some of the issues that I wanted the hierarchy to confront. I received, in response to those 20 letters, maybe 15 letters in response, and they were all very perfunctory. One letter referred me to one of their underlings, and I did go meet with that guy downtown, and he wasn't listening at all. The total thing is helpless. I mean, it's hopeless if we can't communicate with one another. And I know that's what Fortunate Families National is trying to promote. You know, to give you an example, Linda and I, we're currently living in Manistee because of the COVID virus. And up here in Manistee, we have joined the Episcopal Church. We left the Catholic Church up here because of the homophobia that we experienced on a Sunday in June one year, when the pastor got up and told the graduating senior class that they were entering the adult world now and they were going to be confronting terrible challenges, moral challenges that they hadn't faced while they were in school. And the number one issue that he said they were going to confront was homosexuality. And, you know, just no empathy whatsoever. We confronted the pastor after. I told him I had a gay son, and he said, well, sorry, sir, I'm just preaching Catholic doctrine, period. And that was the end of the conversation. So we left the church and we joined the local Episcopal Church, who had welcomed our PFLAG group to meet in their facility in our monthly meetings. Well, to give you the contrast, one meeting a few summers ago, we had our monthly PFLAG meeting, and who should show up but the bishop of the local diocese of the Southern Michigan Diocese, Western Michigan Diocese, and wanted to join our meeting, and he did, and he stayed for 2 hours, and we had a wonderful conversation. And kind of as a sidelight, he was a former Catholic, this bishop. You know, the difference in the communication is the point I'm trying to dramatize here. Here's a guy that, you know, came to us and wanted to hear us and listen to us and get to know us. The local hierarchy, the archdiocese, they aren't even hinting at that. And that's what's got, that bridge has to be crossed. Somehow that bridge has to be built. And I don't know how you do it, frankly.
I'll quickly just add something. Tom is talking about communication with church leaders, I think.
Yeah.
And I think something Frank said is, I'd like to follow up with that. I think getting people to come out is very, very important, and it's very, very difficult. Finding a way for people to come out to people in their parishes, to their pastors, to the deacons. I have a deacon son, a Catholic deacon son who has a job at a local parish in the Detroit area, and I'm sure if people come to him, I don't think they're coming to him to tell him their story about being LGBT, because I think people are totally afraid of that. They're afraid to do it. We need to somehow encourage them to have enough courage to just tell their story to somebody in their parish who has some authority, or not even authority, someone, you know, on some committee. Go to a meeting. I'm not sure. This is not figured out yet, but there's a seedling of an idea. But I think people need to come out and let people in our parishes know they're there.
Yeah. I'd like to just add, I think there are two ways of looking at this, this question. One is definitely to echo the issue that when folks come out and tell their stories, and have a personal relationship with folks, that is what creates the change. And based on that, I say the church is already changing. And to me, that goes back to how we think about church. And I think we always have to remember that the church is the people of God. The church is not that hierarchical pillar. One of our other collegial organizations, Call to Action, used to have a great t-shirt that says, we are the church. What if we believed what we say? And I think there's just tremendous power in that. I mean, I can remember the day back in 1991 when I first saw one of those sort of religion and social issues national polls. And in that poll, it showed that Catholics were more supportive of gay and lesbian people, again, symbol of the times, than folks from any other faith in the United States. This was 1991. And I think about that in the context of how many Catholic families, how many Catholic moms and dads and grandparents and siblings were finding out that their kid was gay and was dying of AIDS at the same time, and had to grapple with the awful pain of their generally son at that point, living a life that kept so much distance in many cases between them, and how much time and how much love their family lost because of, this sort of religiously enforced separation that they were feeling. And I truly, to this day, I believe that those conversations that families had to have with each other in the wake of that devastating loss is what caused that transformation, and that it has continued under more hopeful circumstances, and where families can now embrace each other and go to the weddings and help their loved one through their gender transition, and support them in trying to keep them, their 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds in Catholic schools, and all the things that parents are doing now. The church is changing. And it's because of the courage of all those people who, as Frank said, have come out to family members, have come out to coworkers, have come out to parishioners, have come out to frontline ministers.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's something to this two-part answer.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Frank. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think to answer Craig's question about strategies, I think that it's very important to have a wide variety of strategies. Because I don't think one strategy is the be all and end all. And I think, so I think there has to be different strategies, that work towards the same goal. But one strategy that I do think is really important is one that comes from, from the 60s and the 70s of think globally and act locally. That changing your grassroots parish community is mammoth. That it can have an incredible amount of effect on steps way up the hierarchy of our church. At New Ways Ministry, when we do an educational program, we always end it by asking people, what one step are you going to do after you leave this program? It might be something you do today or tomorrow or next week, but what one concrete action can you take? Even if that concrete action is something as simple as just telling someone that you went to this program on Catholic LGBTQ issues, that in itself does wonders. And I think we can't downplay it. So a lot of strategies.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Frank. Yeah, I think the theme that really emerged from all of your responses, beginning with, is, I think Frank highlighted, right, that there's a panoply of potential organizing things that we can do, and they all are based in very local actions, right? I think that what you are highlighting is that, and Marianne said this really well, right? The bishops are not the whole church. The church is the entire people of God. And so the question that we need to always have in the front of our mind, I think that all of you are pointing out, right, is how do we make every Catholic feel visible? in their activism. And I think that connects to the question of coming out as the people that you are, wherever you happen to be, because that's how you build power. Then you know you're not alone. And then you go from not being alone to being able to communicate with these bishops, even the ones that Tom has been talking about, don't want to talk to him. At some point, if they want to have a diocese that's running, they have to talk to the people who are living in it, you know. And I think that that's one of the things that you're highlighting, is that, you know, the opportunity that, and the cost is, if we as Catholics do this, we're going to go to other congregations. We're going to go to places where there is a welcome, where there is an embrace, where there doesn't seem like there is this stifling, right? And once again, that has nothing to do with the church teaching. If people don't feel like they can walk into a church, there is no church teaching that says you have to make people feel like they can't walk into a church, right? The teaching, if there's no welcome, there is no people, there's no encounter. And so every pastor, from the most conservative to the most progressive, has to have an interest in that. I think that's what your comments really do point up really well. So we're at 9:26 Eastern time. I'm in Central time, and we're coming close to the end of this event. I wanted to pass the mic briefly back to Dr. Stringfellow, because I know he has a few announcements before we formally close at the half hour. So Dr. Stringfellow, do you have did you have any announcements at the end of this?
I do, and let's see. And Dr. Ford, if you can, I can't do it myself. Are you able to spotlight me?
Oh, hold on. I will.
It's not allowing me to do it myself.
Can you do it now? I got you.
There we go. All right.
There you go.
Well, first of all, I just want to just say how blown away I am by the testimonies and the strategizing of our panelists. And again, many of you know Tom and Linda, and for those of you who don't, you know why I love them, and they're just like, oh my God. And Marianne and Frank are two individuals that I've gotten to know through this particular project. And, you know, it's one thing to, you know, kind of organize and plan. It's something else to dive deep into their stories and years of experience of ministering to other people. And again, my heart is just full simply by listening to the stories. I just want to say thank you so much also to all of you who are participating and the questions that were put into the Q&A. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get to them all. I asked a colleague of mine who I referenced at the top of our time together, who was unfortunately let go by her job. That is Terry Gonda. Many of you know Terry as well and may be familiar with her story. And I was hoping to have some time to share her story more in full, but unfortunately we don't have the opportunity to do that. But Terry is someone who, again, has experienced the sting of rejection. And when someone comes and really tries to silence your voice, it's organizations such as the ones that we have here tonight that really helps amplify those, you know, voices that have been tried to be silent. So thank you so very much to everyone. Tonight was primarily designed to be a healing space, a time for sharing of our stories and kind of think. But of course, you have to think about, well, then what's next? What are some next things to do? Well, we at the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies and Inclusive Justice and the other organizations that are represented here tonight, we would like to invite you to a strategy session. It's going to be a training where myself and, let me put this up. Here we go. Myself and Father Brian Massengale will be presenting a training around how to educate ourselves around harmful religious liberty legislation, but also to prepare ourselves for a couple of challenges that are right around the corner. More specifically, we have a case that will be coming to the Supreme Court called Fulton versus Philadelphia. And it is a case about a Catholic organization that is refusing LGBT couples to adopt. And so we have a case such as that, but there's always something to speak to in terms of discrimination and belittling of individuals or silencing of voices. If you are interested in learning and gaining some skills and tools from a Catholic perspective, we invite you to come and join us. Again, the training will be on Tuesday, October 27th from 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern time. I apologize particularly for those of you who are outside of the US, but this will be recorded. This event training will be recorded, and we will share with everyone who registers. So even if this time frame does not fit your schedule, but you're interested in gaining some of that knowledge, we encourage you to register. You can go to our website at clgs.org, and you can find it there, and you can, with the registration link, or even to inclusivejustice.org, and you can find the registration link for there as well. We hope to have you join us, and again, appreciate your participation. Again, I appreciate all of these panelists, but particularly Dr. Ford, again, you have done a masterful job with facilitating this grand occasion, and we're just so honored to have you with us. And so again, we're just so grateful for all who were here tonight. And God, we just say thank you again for the opportunity we have to share our stories and to live in our authentic selves. Go with us and be with those who we care and love. In your many names we pray. Amen. Thank you, you all. Amen. Blessings to you, and hopefully we'll see you next month.